This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so my employee, when he joins my organization, uh, once he completes 2 years of service, let's assume he should be getting a seniority payment of, let's say, 500 per month, and then or 500 per year. And then once he completes 2 years, he should automatically get 1,000, and after 3 years maybe automatically get 2,000, and so on and so forth, right? And what is unique about these plans, I can just go ahead and create them as a normal allowance plan, right? So I can create, for example, an amount based allowance plan, right? Okay, and in that amount based allowance plan, I can go ahead and default the amount, right? So the default amount is, let's say, 0, and then I can probably go ahead and create multiple plan profiles, right? So I can say a plan profile with eligibility criteria saying length of service is uh, greater than 1 year, less than 2 years, uh, so greater than 1, less than 2, then he should be, the default amount is 500. Similarly, I could have another plan profile where length of service is uh, greater than, so LOS is greater than 2, and maybe uh, less than 3, then he gets 1,000, and so on and so forth, right? So I can go ahead and create an allowance plan which probably allows me to go ahead and build these different uh, plan requirements, right, with the help of my plan profiles. But then one problem with an allowance plan is that, so if I join my organization on, let's say, 1st of April 2019, right, and on 31st of March 2020 I complete 1 year, and today I my plan amount should automatically change to 500, right? So the plan was assigned to me right on the day I joined, but at that point in time my plan amount was 0, right? Because my length of service was basically less than 1 year. Now today, when my length of service is greater than 1 year and less than 2 years, that plan amount should automatically change to 500. Now, with an allowance plan, this automatically change will not happen, right? Someone will actually have to go to the employee profile and then process a request compensation change for the worker, right? And then go ahead and make those manual adjustments, or system would default the amount to 500, right? So this is a manual process. This is still fine if I'm just talking about 1 or 10 or 50 employees. But then if for any normal size organizations which probably has 1,000, 10,000 people, it is not possible for HR to keep track of who all is completing 1 year or 2 year or service anniversary on a given date, and then automatically run these ad hoc events for those employees, right? So this is where a calculated plan comes in handy. So a calculated plan, sorry guys, so a calculated plan would, based on the calculation that I have defined, it will automatically go ahead and calculate the value of those plans, right? And on to today, when I completed my first year, system would automatically assign me 500 rupees, right? So this is basically a dynamic calculation which happens even without someone having to run an event, right? Okay, now this was the status as of workday 33, or as of the latest release 2020 R1. So there were just one type of calculate. Okay, first let me uh, uh, make define this, and then we'll talk about those other aspects. Okay, so a calculated plan, it basically leverages, and you guys would have because you are already trained in time and absence, I believe you guys are already aware of the workdays calculation engine, right? Using which we do all those different absence and time calculations. Now, a calculated plan functionality basically leverages that same engine, right? I'll go ahead and build different calculations with the help of workdays calculation engine, right? Okay, so a workdays calculation plan, it basically leverages workdays calculation engine. uh, 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 to dynamically uh, calculate the value uh, for that plan for the associated employee, right? So I build these different calculations, and system would dynamically calculate the value of those plans, right? As I mentioned before, workday 2020 R1, there was just one type of plan, which were your dynamic calculations, right? Which means system would automatically go ahead and calculate the value every time. So if an employee is associated with a calculated plan, if I go to the employee's profile, and we'll see how it looks, when I go ahead and click on that compensation tab, system would show me the
Hello.
value of that calculated plan. Yeah.
Yeah, Ali. So here you want to say if something is
Mhm.
time based, let's say let's say it's just like a service of year or something which changes with the time. So if we have to
Right.
build condition on such thing, we need to create calculated plan. And if something
Right.
which is
So
event driven,
any.
let's say
Mhm.
manager, let's say individual contributor or manager.
Right.
So somebody change goes to from individual contributor to a manager position via a business process event. So for
Right.
those
Right.
things, we can leverage allowance profiles,
The
right?
allowance
Or
plan
plan
profile.
profile.
Perfect. Yes. Yes. Correct. Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
okay.
So everything, anything which is time driven, maybe age, length of service, or any of those factors wherein an employee's plan amount changes automatically, right, or dynamically, that is where I'll go ahead and leverage this functionality of calculated plan. But then what is happening is, and this was a very big requirement, even though as of yesterday my plan amount was 500, and as of today my plan amount is 1000. So what happens is system doesn't generate any events. Uh, when a system automatically recalculates the value associated with that plan every day or every time, and then it would just show me that the amount of this ABC plan is 1000 calculated as of today, right? Now many clients, they had a requirement saying we want to see the history of those calculation changes that are happening. At this point in time, no history is generated. So now Workday has created a new plan type, which is basically an event driven calculation plan, right? Now, even in this case, when I say event driven, you don't have to go ahead and initiate a request compensation change. What you will do is, Workday has enhanced the MOM functionality, mass operations management. So you would go ahead and schedule a mass operations management report, and every day it automatically checks, and this is only for your event driven plans. System automatically checks the calculated value, or the MOM schedule automatically checks the value for each calculated plan for each employee, and then it automatically generates those events, right? This has just come in 2020 release 1, so which went live last week around 17th. Okay, in which ways we'll look at that as well. So I'm sure you guys are already aware of MOM. This is a functionality which is part of your HCM core. Okay, in which ways, let me go into the system, and then we'll go ahead and look at these plans. So if I go ahead and open a calculated plan, Okay, all right. So this is a new feature. Now, earlier all plans were dynamic plans. However, with 2020 release 1, so if I can show you, not sure if I have access to this report. Compensation. Let's select both of them. There are 44 items. Let's see if I have calculated plans. Okay, so if you see, now we have something called event driven calculated plans. And what does it say? Workday expands the calculated compensation plan functionality. We enable you to configure event driven calculated plans that generate compensation events with effective date. But even in this case, as I mentioned, you don't have to manually go ahead and generate that event. So you don't have to go to an employee profile and go ahead and initiate request compensation change, for example, for that employee. System would automatically go ahead and do that. So all you'll have to do is you'll have to go ahead and schedule a mass operation management, right? uh, right, so if you see, uh, Workday calculates and updates the plan amount during the calculation event. So there are two ways. Either you go to an employee profile and you're performing some request compensation change for the employee for me. Um, in that case, because I'm any which is initiating a manual event, or maybe my change job is happening. In that case, system would any which ways go ahead and calculate the value of that event driven plan, right? But then this is not possible for me to go ahead and initiate this manual event for every employee if I have, for example, a 10,000 workforce. In that case, I'll go ahead and schedule something called a mass operations management. So MOM, which will automatically take care of generating these events. But any which ways, the way we create those plans are exactly the same, right? I'll go ahead and create a, or let's create this from 2010, and then we'll see if we can assign it to some employee. So I'm creating a dynamic calculated plan, and let me go ahead and do OK. All right, now in the structure of the calculated plan, if you see, I don't have to specify any amount value, right? Okay. uh, by default, all your calculated plans are included as part of total salary and allowances. So as you mentioned, when would I create a calculated plan wherein I want the value of that plan to be determined automatically. So in essence, a calculated plan is also an allowance plan, right? The only difference is the value of that calculated plan should be generated automatically, dynamically, based on the length of service, age, or any of those calculation parameter. But for whatever reasons, if and that is why by default the value of all calculated plans is part of the total salary and allowances compensation basis. But then if I do not want a calculated plan value to be included in this basis, then I can explicitly select this checkbox saying that do not include this value in the total salary and allowances compensation basis, right? Okay, so again, pretty standard. The only thing of interest here is the calculation, and we'll go ahead and talk about that in brief. So I'm creating, let's say, a length or age driven bonus, right? Or maybe length of service or seniority, whatever. So seniority allowance, right? Again, I'll go ahead and link it with a compensation element, pretty standard, and I'm linking it with allowance. I'll go ahead and define my currency, and I'm calling it US dollars. I'll go ahead and associate it with frequency. So I want an annual compensation to be paid out for the seniority allowance, I go ahead and link it with the eligibility rules, right? So till this point in time, everything is standard. The only thing which is difference is I don't assign any amount to these calculated plans, right? The reason is those amounts would be automatically calculated based on the calculations that I have defined. Okay, now again, I am not an expert in calculations because I've not worked in absence payroll. That's where, or worked heavily in those areas. That's where they are majorly used. But then this functionality leverages the same calculation framework. So again, I'll go ahead and build. Just give me a second. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I have all these calculation that can be created. They are basically similar to my uh, 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 calculated fields, right? I have those different functions. For example, I have a constant value. For that, I have something called, so if I open it simultaneously, so when I go ahead and create a calculated field, the only difference is, right, when I go ahead and create a calculated field, I'll have to specify the business object and all those details, right? The advantage of using a calculation is that I don't need to understand the business object framework as such, right? But then as such, you see that the functions that I'm using here, they are basically similar to the calculations that I built. So for example, I have constant date calculation, constant value calculation, bill date calculation, which is similar to format date, right? I have date difference calculation, which is again a function in, which is again a function available here, right? So if you are already aware with calculated fields, this is similar to that. The only difference is I don't have to build any calculation based on business objects. Okay, now this is what I need, right? Let me take an example. So any employee whose let's say length of service is uh, let's say less than 1 year, I want to give him, let's say, 100 US dollars. Length of service is greater than 1, less than 2. Probably I want to give him 500, uh, greater than 2, maybe 1000, right? Maybe this is what I want to do, right? Okay, now this, if you see, is basically your eval expression, right? So with eval expression, I have this option to go ahead and evaluate a series of values or series of conditions, and based on that, go ahead and return the corresponding amount or corresponding value, right? So similar to this eval expression or eval expression band calculated field, I have something called create conditional calculation. So if I go ahead and open this, you see that I can evaluate a series of conditions. So basically a series of if statements, and based on whether those if statements are true, I can return a corresponding value, right? So in this case, I basically have to evaluate three different if statements. If the length of service is less than 1, if the length of service is greater than 1 but less than 2, and then if it is greater than 2, which is basically our default statement, right? Okay, so I would go ahead and build those conditions. Right now, how do you build your conditions? Again, there is another calculated field function, which is value comparison, right? So basically I'm comparing length of service of employees with a specific value, right? Okay, so uh, what I'm going to do is length of service Length of service in years. Now this is also a calculation. If you see, there is another calculation which is called instance value calculation. So what it does is, so if you see instance value calculation, and this is actually similar to your lookup related value. So if you worked on calculated fields, you have something called lookup related value, wherein you can pull the value or another instance from another business object. Similarly, what you're doing here is you're basically getting the length of service of the employee. So this is a field, right? And we have all dealt with this field. So this is a normal workday delivered field, right? It is a numeric field which basically tracks the length of the service of the employee, right? Now I want to get this field into my calculation engine. And how do I do that? Using this instance value calculation. So Workday has delivered a lot of these instant value calculations. If you see, this is Workday owned, but then there is some field which is not Workday delivered. I can always go ahead and build this instance value calculation, right? To basically go ahead and pull that data, right? But then we already have those common fields available, right? I'm just going to go ahead and use that. Okay, so I'm saying if length of service is, let's start from the top. I'm saying if length of service is greater than or equal to, and this is actually a constant value calculation, right? Again, similar to your constants. So if I come to calculated field, I have these date constants, numeric constants, and text constants. Similar to that in calculation, I have a constant value calculation, a constant date calculation, right? So if some constant is available, I'll go ahead and use that. If there is no constant available, I'll go ahead and create a new one. So my requirement is if length of service is 2, right? And this is, if you see, a constant value calculation, which is again Workday owned, right? Okay, so I'm saying, or maybe let's create a new one, see if there is 5 available. So there is 5 available. Let's use 5. Okay, so I'm saying if length of service is 5, go ahead and associate it with compensation. And I'm saying length of service greater than equal to 5, right? Let me copy this, close this, and this is what goes in here. So if length of service is greater than equal to 5, let's say I want to pay him 2000. Again, this is a constant value calculation. If I go ahead and open this, a constant value calculation which is Workday owned, right? So let me go ahead and open this. Okay, my next is to go ahead and create another constant value calculation, or sorry, create another value comparison calculation. Again, length of service and this time less than or length of service is greater than or equal to 2. Okay, will this, there is one thing that you'll notice here, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so similarly I can create another one, but let's not do it. Length of employee seniority calculation compensation. Okay, now this is what you'll have to do. Unlike your compensation eligibility rule, wherein you can do a series of comparisons using and or, here you see that you don't have that option, right? So when you build your conditions, right, or when you build your value comparison, there is just basically one comparison you're doing. In that is why your order becomes extremely important. So what Workday would do is it will evaluate each of these conditions in sequence. The moment it identifies the first valid condition, it will go ahead and basically come out and assign the corresponding result. Now if I go ahead and assign length of service order 1, right, and this as order 2, what will happen? Any employee whose length of service is greater than 2 years, and it could be 10 years as well, he would Workday would first evaluate this condition. So if I'm evaluating an employee whose length of service is 10 years, which is greater than equal to 2, Workday would directly assign him 1000 rupees or $1000, right? So it will never come to this second calculation, right? So that is why I'll first have to give this as the order 1, because now any employee whose length of service is greater than or equal to 5, so 10 in this case, would be assigned 2000. If length of service is not greater than equal to 5, then it will evaluate the next condition, see if his length of service is greater than equal to 2. If it is, then he'll be assigned this value, and if the length of service is not greater than equal to 2, then I can go ahead and assign the default value, right? Okay, there's no 500 available. Let's go ahead and create that constant value calculation, right? So create constant value calculation, and I'm saying this is 500 compensation, and I'm just going to assign my numeric value, right? Now I can go ahead and copy this and assign the default amount of 500, right? Okay, let me go ahead and copy this. This is our employee seniority calculation. Okay, any employee who belongs to, uh, let's look at Steve Morgan's profile. Let me first save it, else it will error out. I knew this would happen. So let me create this calculated plan once again. So 1/1/2015 dynamic plan. Okay. uh, Employee seniority allowance, that is what I'm calling it, and an allowance plan. Currency I'm assigning as US dollars. Again, this is optional. If I don't do it, it will be pulled from the grade, but then that is fine. And let me for now save it, and let's go to Steve Morgan's profile, and then we'll manually assign him this plan, right? Or let's take any other employee, Chris. Okay, so Chris Nugent, if I go to the additional actions, compensation, let me go ahead and where is request compensation change? Okay, I would assign her this plan from 1st of Jan 2016. I don't have the authorization to assign calculated plans. Total base pay, total unit salary, allowance, merit, bonus, stock, commission. Let's see, domain. Do I have any calculated plan domain? Oh, sorry. Add compensation plans. Okay, so this is the domain. Let's see who all has this authorization. Okay, this policy is currently suspended. Let me go ahead and enable this policy. Okay, does anyone have authorization for that? I think no one has got authorizations. I'll go ahead and edit permissions. Okay, so all these people have. Okay, in which ways? Logan McNeil, I think she's an HR administrator and I have it here. So that is fine. Let me go ahead and do okay. What are the secured items it includes? Add row for proposed tasklet. Okay, let's see. Activate pending security policy changes. Confirm. Okay, I had not checked the security aspect of it, so I believe this should work, but let's see. So again, I'll do from 2006. Okay, 2016. Right. Okay, I add my calculated plans in other us, right? So what is my calculated plan? This is seniority allowance. Okay, it gives him 2000. Right, let's look at employee's profile. Go to her job details. So 2000, right? So her length of service is greater than 5 years, and then she gets 2000, right? Uh, right, system automatically does that assignment, right? We'll also see if I can pull an employee whose reason is required. So we'll pick some employee who is relatively new. Plan assignment. Okay, it has gone to his manager for approval. So these plans, guys, these plans, they come in very handy. I was working for compensation for Korea, and they had lots of these kinds of requirements, wherein based on employees' seniority, uh, they wanted the compensation to be automatically calculated, right? So very handy plans. I'll also probably show you MOM, but then obviously I'll not go in details on that. That is part of core compensation. In fact, it's a cross-functional component. Uh, Many modules use MOM. So it's a mass operations management for bulk processing of your business processes. Let me do stop proxy. Okay, now if I go to employees compensation, uh, where is right? If you see, it says calculated as of 31/3/2000, right? So probably in the system the date is 31/3. So if you go ahead and open this plan tomorrow, it will say calculated as of 1st of April 2020, or whenever the date changes. So these are basically your dynamic plans. So basically these are your dynamic plans. Now if you see, the problem is, once I've done the assignment, next time the employee moves the threshold, right? So let's say after she completes 6 years, the amount should be 3,000. So the day she completes 3 years, 6 years, system would automatically say that the amount is 3,000 US dollars annual and calculated as of that date. So no history is created in employees payment history, right? So that is why it becomes difficult to go ahead and identify or do a history of these plan changes. And that is where those event driven plans come into picture, right? The advantages, as I mentioned, you can go ahead and configure something called mass operations management. Again, I'll not go into detail. Let's first pull some employee uh, who is less than 5 years, right? So this is one employee I think I just hired recently, 2019, which means this employee has just completed 1 year, right? So let's see if I can assign this employee this plan. So this doesn't depend on the plan assignment date, right? Irrespective of when I'm assigning this plan, system checks the length of service of the employee as of today, right? And then automatically identifies that this employee is greater than 5 years or greater than 2 years or less than 1 year in terms of length of service, right? Employee seniority allowance. Okay, if you see, the amount associated with this employee is 500, and if I go ahead and open the calculation, that I think was the default amount. mm, so length of service is okay, yeah. So the employee's length of service is not greater than 2 years, right? The length of service is still less than 2 years as of today's date, and that is why system is by default assigning him the default amount of 500. Okay, let me cancel this. Create calculated plans. Again, will not create an event driven plan. There's no difference between how you create these two different plan types. uh, let's see. Okay, again, if you see, I define the plan name, the plan description, eligibility rule, the same concept, compensation element. I can basically assign the same employee seniority allowance, right? So the same calculation, there's no difference in how you build those calculations, right? Oh, this is an allowance, right? Sorry, right? So there's no difference in any aspect of these plans. The only difference is this is an event driven calculated plan and this is a dynamic calculated plan. Right now, as I mentioned, how do you manage it? Either you manually go ahead and initiate request compensation change for an employee. So in this plan, system would not automatically show you that this plan is calculated as of 31/3/2020, right? That is not something which will happen, right? So unlike here, wherein on the employee profile it shows me calculated as of this date, this is something which will not happen. It will actually go ahead and generate a job history for the employee or worker history for the employee every time that event is initiated, either manually through request compensation change or any other compensation change activity, or through your mass operations management. Again, you guys can go through this. I'll not cover this in detail. I think I don't have access to it. Okay, mass operation management, right? And if you see, this can be used to run not just for your uh, this is basically a mass management task to manage your business processes, right? For example, you want to mass cancel your business processes or mass advance your business processes. That is where this task comes into picture, right? And this is the task that has been enhanced to handle your event driven calculated plans as well. Let me quickly check if I can assign some access to myself. I've not reviewed this myself. See, if you see, these are the different options available. I can advance a business process, I can cancel a feedback request, I can launch free feedback, I can cancel a business process. So these are all the options which were available till date, right, for your mass operations management. But now Workday has added a few other types. uh, Calculated plan assignment, right? Similarly, what else do I have? Calculated plan assignments, right? So there are a couple of new mass operation type that Workday has added. Obviously, you'll have to give access to those mass operations type. Right now, if you see, I don't have access to that because no security group has been assigned access to those mass operations type, right? The only two operations type for which I have access to is cancel, because that is the security group in which I belong, and I think advance, right? That is why those two options I'm getting when I go to mass operations management, right? As I mentioned, I'll not go ahead and cover this in detail. This is a completely separate topic. These are the only two options I get because my security is only set up for those two uh, types, right? Okay, any questions?
No, it's clear.
Okay, thank you. uh, just for, let's see if I can uh, so the task is create calculated plan, right, for your event driven. For your dynamic plans, the plan amount is automatically calculated, right, every time employee compensation, right? uh, Plan, so no history is created. Remove this, not relevant, right? So no compensation change history is created. On the other hand, your event driven plans, the the plan amount is calculated based on the calculation uh, engine only if either manual event is initiated, right? For example, your request compensation change or a mass operations management event is scheduled or run manually, right? So ideally what you'll do is you'll go ahead and create a mass operations management schedule and then go ahead and schedule it to run probably every day or every week, right? And then system would automatically check all the relevant employees, right, for whom a change needs to happen, and then automatically go ahead and generate an event for those employees, right? And those events can be viewed in employees worker history or the compensation change history. Okay, so the task is create calculated plans, uh, exclude from merit. So by default, the plan amount is included in total salary and allowances compensation basis. However, if this checkbox is selected, then it is excluded, right? So if I go back to my employee's profile, let's look at her compensation basis details. So total salary and allowances, if you see, this also includes the amount associated with the dynamic calculated plan. So by default, all your calculated plans are considered allowances, but then this checkbox is selected, then they are not included as part of your total salary and allowances uh, basis calculation. Dynamic calculation, event driven calculation. What else did we discuss? Right, a few calculation types just for your reference. uh, as I mentioned, this is something which is part of your absence in time, so nothing in detail. Your arithmetic calculation, this is basically for your arithmetic, uh, so your addition, subtraction, multiplication and division, right? So the task is create calculation. If you just enter create calculation, system would basically show you all the calculations that you can create. Calculation, sorry. Okay, so the next one is instance value. And what is the purpose? To extract the value, or I can say numeric value, because we are dealing with compensation, numeric value of a workday CRF, right? Basically your class report fields. You can use this to pull data from any of your workday class report fields, right? Okay, your conditional calculations, these are basically your if else calculations, right? So if this is true, then workday would return the results corresponding to that. If it fails, workday would go to the else statement and then to the next else statement and finally to the default value. Okay, you have constants, right? We used one constant value calculation. So we have date constant, we have numeric constant, so there's no text constant. What else? You have date calculations, so you have date difference, right? You can find, so length of service, I use the workday delivered instance value, right? And that is how I calculated my length of service. But then there is other option as well, right? I could have built a date difference calculation wherein I could have subtracted today's date from employee's hire date, right? And that would also have given me the same length of service of the employee, right? So I can build a date difference, increment, decrement date, construct date, extract date. So there are a number of date related calculations which are available. Okay, so difference, uh, increment, decrement, build date or construct date, and so on and so forth. Okay, I'll stop here, guys. So from tomorrow onwards, we'll start with the advanced compensation plan, your merit bonus. There's a couple of aspects of core compensation which are left. Severance is one aspect which I think is left. Apart from that, I believe I've covered most of the other aspects, or almost all the other aspects. Uh, yeah, questions.
Yeah, I have one question.
Hmm.
Is Yeah, so let's say we have created all the allowances, salary plans, and different plans, and so we have existing employees in our system for whom, let's say, grade and grade profile have not been assigned, neither any allowances or the plans have been assigned. So
Hmm.
do we need to do an EIB load for all those things to for an
Uh,
initial
so there
population?
is So for assigning plans, there is a task available. You have roll out and remove. I'll talk about that as well. Just
Okay,
remind me tomorrow. But for grade and grade profile, that is something there's no task available. Obviously, you'll have to do an EIP for that, right? But then, for example, you created a new calculation plan or a new merit plan, and now you want to roll it out to all of your employee population or a big of number of your employee population. You can just go ahead and roll out this plan to or multiple plans to your employees, so you can do that. But if you want to assign compensation from scratch, grade package, grade profile, there's no task available, so you'll have to do an EIB for that.
okay, okay, fine.
Okay, so it's a very simple task, the way we have done our other maintenance related tasks, right? Plan adjustments and all that. This is a task which is similar to that, pretty straightforward. Will just remind me tomorrow, we'll do that task.
Okay, fine.
Okay. All right, so guys, I'll stop here. We'll talk about merit advanced bonus plans, and then we'll talk about the merit review process. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining. You guys have a good day ahead. We'll speak again tomorrow. Bye guys, take care.